Commander is the worst format in Magic the Gathering. It is the bane of Magic. It has ruined my favorite hobby. Prove me wrong.
Gladly.
If I want to play Magic, I want to play one-on-one.
Commander does social right.
But it doesn't do competitive right. Maybe you're playing it wrong, or maybe the format is just wrong altogether. If you want to play a social format, then winning should not be everything for you. It should be about the experience.
Then don't play Commander. You've been waiting to talk about this one.
Yeah, I have been waiting to talk about this one. I think I've definitely wanted a platform to sort of express my feelings on this one. But what is it about Commander that you like?
There's so many reasons, but if I'm going to break it down, I'd say the main thing for me is socializing with friends, spending time with them, just chilling out. And you cannot do that with any competitive format of Magic.
Well, you don't need to play Magic to do that.
Yeah, but imagine chilling out and playing Magic. That's just win-win.
Magic is a competitive experience for me. Like, if I'm chilling out, then I'm chilling out with my friends. If I'm playing Magic with them, then I'm probably not going to play Commander with them.
Look, I don't know about you and your friends, but my friends, we spend most of our waking hours and minutes thinking about Magic and what Magic cards we want to play and what Magic cards we want to stick in our deck, and Magic's life.
All right, so Commander has this reputation of being like the big social format for Magic, and it brings people together at a table, which I guess you couldn't do like on a 1v1 basis, right?
It's called Magic the Gathering, you know? You can't have a gathering if there's just a 1v1 format.
It's a gathering of two people.
Yeah.
You can have tournaments and pods of 8 and draft and stuff, right?
Basic maths would dictate that a gathering of 4 or 5 is better than 2.
No, what defines better? Like, you know...
More is better.
What if you're with 5 people that you don't like?
Well, that's the problem. You've been playing Magic, you've been playing Commander wrong all this time.
I think people just take it way too seriously. If it's a social format, right, which ultimately Commander is a social format, then stop taking it so seriously. Why does so much of the community take it so seriously? Why is it it's so focused around winning? I think the issue lies in the fact that Magic is a competitive game in its nature and its design. It's designed to be this competitive, tight experience.
My problem with the competitive nature of Magic is anxiety. There's just too much going on for me, too much burden upon me. The dueling nature of Magic. Commander takes that away. Commander just makes it so much more relaxed. I've always enjoyed building decks in Magic, but then playing the decks in a 2-player format, it wasn't the most fun part for me. Commander has given me an outlet where I can actually play the decks without any real kind of stress about anything.
But I think that's what makes Magic so special, is the stress of that competitive environment. I look at video games, for example, and I always really enjoy those video games that can sort of invoke some stress or some emotional response in me, because that just goes to show how immersive or engrossing that whole experience is, and that is the same experience for me in Magic. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and I made the comparison to like FromSoft games in Magic, or like, you know, competitive trading card games. And for those that don't know, FromSoft are the designers and creators of Elden Ring and all of the Dark Souls games before that. They're known for being these really grueling and challenging experiences. It's not meant to be easy. You will die and die again. But it taught me a really important life lesson, and a lesson that everyone should know is that if you fail, try again. If you keep failing, keep trying again until you will succeed. And when you do succeed, you'll be a stronger person at the end of it. And that's what Magic teaches you as well. And that is what the whole competitive TCG experience is supposed to be. Like, you just have to accept that it's going to be all right to fail. That's all you have to do. And suddenly that anxiety goes away and you just treat it as a learning experience. That's the lesson that you have to learn.
Yeah, I don't think competitive Magic's about failing first.
It's about failing until you succeed, because there's always going to be somebody better than you. And you're always trying to learn. That is the whole point in Magic. And that is lost in Commander.
I don't think so. Because in Commander, it's not about winning. That's the main part about Commander. At least I think everyone should understand that in Commander, it doesn't matter if you win or you lose. Like any good story, it's all about the journey, not the destination. And that's what Commander does right.
Well, why is it that when I see people losing at my Friday Night Magic, they always seem to make a really big deal about losing, and I constantly get people coming up to me afterwards saying, I didn't win a single game of Commander today. And it's like, you know, you played 1 game of Commander, or you played 2 games of Commander, your average win rate should be about 25%. So you're doing about right. There clearly is, like, you're making this point that it's not about winning. From my experience, it's different. People really take it seriously. They want to win in that. I mean, this is the argument I'm making, is if that's what you want to play, if you want to play a social format, then winning should not be everything for you. It should be about the experience. And right, like, I think you're probably the ideal Commander player, or you're just using it as an argument in this debate.
I'm just trying to be argumentative.
Are you? Well, the thing is, I think in reality, there is still that desire to win. And when you're trying to win in an inherently social format, then you're playing it wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you're playing it wrong, or maybe the format is just wrong altogether. Either or, I'm not entirely sure myself.
Okay, staying on the whole social side of things. From the points you've made, to me, it sounds like maybe it's your experiences in Commander that might have just rubbed you up the wrong way. For me, Commander, I play with my friends. I play with friends I know. I don't generally play with others. And if I do, I'm quite laid back and relaxed and try to read the table. I think that's very important in Commander. I do prefer to play with friends. People I know, people that I enjoy spending my time with anyway. That's at least for me what Commander is about. And that's what being sociable is about. There's a format for competitive, and there's a format for being social. Commander does social right,
but it doesn't do competitive right. And this is the argument I'm making, is that people treat it as a competitive format.
The CEDH.
Well, I don't think we're talking about CEDH here, or competitive EDH, which is itself, it's a different format. It's not one that I know a great deal about. I know it exists. I haven't really explored it, so I'm not talking about that in this argument. What I'm talking about is casual Commander, and I think that's what you're talking about, because I know you haven't really engaged in CEDH.
Yeah.
The key word is casual, and it's not true. It doesn't get treated as a casual format. That is the biggest issue with it, because inherently is a competitive game. It's supposed to be. That's the whole point of it. And I love that competitive grind where I feel like I'll learn something new every single time that I play a game, whether I'm winning or I'm losing. That is the point in competition, is to feel like you learn something and you gain something from each experience. And I never feel like that with Commander. And if people talk about it being like this social experience, you know what? I'd rather just sit around with some friends, sipping tea and chatting. I think that is a better social experience than Commander is. If I want to play Magic, I want to play one-on-one.
Well, that's your opinion. Commander's cool, man.
You know, I think I have an analogy of why I think Commander doesn't work, mostly. And I'm saying this knowing that it's the most popular MTG format. But this is just my opinion anyway. You know, you can disagree with this by any means, and you can just leave a comment below and tell me how wrong I am about this. But you have to treat Commander as a social experience. I think you're totally right in saying that. The same way that, you know, if you go out with a group of friends, you have to treat that as a social experience. If one person is not on the same wavelength as everyone else, then they don't get that same experience. It ruins that experience, because that experience is supposed to be that group together and having a great time and looking out for each other. People talk about Rule Zero so much in Commander, and it's that idea that when you come to the table, you should all come to an agreement as to what power level are you going to play. Are you going to play any infinite loops in your deck? Are you going to play like a really high power commander? Are you going to play lots of tutors which are going to streamline your deck and make it feel less random and more predictable? But fine, if you've got a group that would genuinely sort of have the same sort of understanding of that, then that's absolutely fine. But to try and quantify power level, you're taking the experience of Magic, which is inherently a subjective experience, and you're trying to objectify it. You're saying, oh, my power, you know, I've got a deck here and it's power level like 7 out of 10, right? I mean, I'm literally just talking about experience I had at our Friday Night Magic. We sit down at the table. I said, I'm playing a precon. The other person said they're playing a precon. And one person sits down and said, oh, I don't really know about my power level. I think it'll be fine with precons. And then goes to play with like every single stack piece that was available to the colors of their deck, with tutors and like Jewel Lotus. And it was like a borderline CEDH deck, right? It was like a 10 out of 10 in power. This person had built it to win. And it was salty because it was all about milling. I didn't want that experience. The other person that played a precon didn't want that experience. There was one person that had a great time on that table and two people that had a really rubbish time. And that just feels like, if that's what you call socializing, that's what you call a great social experience, then I don't want to play Commander. I don't want to socialize. That's how I sort of summarize the whole feelings of like the whole people making the argument of it being social.
The social aspect of it is definitely the player count. There's few other trading card games that achieve that same level of interactivity between all those players as well. It's definitely more board game-esque, and I say that in a positive way. I come out of a board gaming background and then kind of went into trying TCGs as well, because it's very similar stuff. It's all gaming end of the day. The idea of casual gaming with a larger group, it appeals to me. And socializing, yeah, I mean, it really depends on people that you know, people that you enjoy spending your time with. Yeah, if you go to a Friday night Magic and you end up with 3 random people, it's going to be tough to socialize, but that's not what Commander's about for me. Commander's not about that environment. Commander's more about chilling out, relaxing.
Well, it might be about chilling out and relaxing for you, but the point I've been making is that it's not about chilling out and relaxing for everyone else.
Then don't play Commander.
Well, you should tell that. You should come to my shop on a Friday, and you should tell that to my audience.
These people are clearly very competitive. They should try like drafting or something.
We will come back to that.
Okay.
You're talking about it being like this really interactive experience.
It is interactive. If I get bored of speaking to that person, I can start speaking to this person.
I mean interactive in the sense that you're sort of interacting with them on the board, right? You know, you're sort of intercepting their play and that sort of thing. I find it's the exact opposite with Commander. I personally feel like it becomes less interactive because you're so overwhelmed constantly by the whole board state, like 4 people's board states. You know, you're playing with like the highest power cards here. This is like playing, you know, vintage, the equivalent of like vintage. So you've got access to all of these ridiculous cards. You know, you look over this person over here and they've got like 50 different artifacts out. And you look at this person over here and they're playing like a Voltron deck and you can't keep track of all of the different auras that are attached to their commander. And I can't even keep track of my own board. Never mind, like, you know, 3 other people's boards. I get to the point where I just get overwhelmed and I just don't want to interact with any of them. So I find it less interactive. And also, the turns last way too long. It makes it boring. Like you're talking about it being like a board game. Look, if we play like a 4-player board game like Scythe or something, that keeps me interested. That keeps me hooked all the way through. When I play 4 players Commander, I genuinely get bored. There's going to be one person who's going to play Solitaire, who's going to bring out their stupid like energy science deck that they put loads of these artifacts into, and then they want to activate every single artifact on their turn individually and then play them out. It's not fun. Like, one of the greatest things about Magic that's really still separates it from so many other trading card games is the off-turn interaction, and it takes away that experience. It takes away the off-turn interaction for me in Commander. It really does.
The only point you've proven to me here is that you can't handle Commander. Maybe it's a more advanced game and it's just not for you. Let's talk cost. There's a few ways to look at Commander, and when it comes to cost and value, I think the main point for me is that it might be expensive to initially build a deck. I mean, I know Commander decks can go into the thousands. Yeah, I get that. But once you've spent that money, those cards are not getting rotated out. They're there. You can come back after 10 years if you want, and you'll probably still have a legal deck. You don't need to spend too much money in Commander, realistically speaking, over a longer time period. This is differ between individuals. You know, I know people with 50 Commander decks as well. In effect, the cost isn't that bad because you don't have to, if you don't want to, spend too much money on Commander. And those cards that you already own usually can get used in other decks that you end up building anyway.
I see your point. I think Commander is pretty good when it comes to cost. I think from a perspective of like buying precons.
Precons, amazing value.
They genuinely are pretty good value.
It is the best product that Magic does.
It's the only product that Magic does.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to talk about products in Magic, like Commander has literally dominated Magic since 2010. They're all just Commander decks coming out. Like literally next week, there's going to be like 5 more Commander decks coming out, and you know, the week after that, there'll probably be like a Secret Lair Commander deck coming out, and then the week after that, there's probably going to be another Commander deck from the standard set, and it's overwhelming. It's totally overwhelming, right?
No, that's variability, not overwhelming.
No, it's overwhelming. Like there's this. Everyone's talking about product fatigue. Where do you think all of this product fatigue is coming from?
Yeah, product fatigue's a thing, but once again, once you've got one Commander deck, you don't need to buy another Commander deck potentially.
Yeah, I mean that's a very boring way to play Magic if that's what you are gonna do.
I'm just from a cost perspective, you know, it can be potentially, it could be the cheapest format of Magic to get into and stay on.
Yeah, but if you want to build your deck yourself, like Commander's gonna be expensive. Like because you've basically got access to pretty much all of the really powerful cards. And most people will, like, right? You can argue about people saying like, oh, you know, I only play precons, or you know, I don't like playing high power level. There's a lot of audience that really want to just play the high power stuff. It will become expensive. The land base can become very expensive. You want the full set of like Triomes and Fetch lands and Shock lands, and you can play revised dual lands.
Usually what makes the deck so expensive.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, like, you can make it as expensive or as cheap as you want to, I think, in reality. If you want to talk about cost, how much does it cost you to go to a draft? A standard set draft. We ran it at like 15 quid. It provided such an engaging and tight competitive experience. It was so much fun. Like, they are so much fun. I don't think cost for any Magic format is cheap, really. I think if you're cost conscious and you don't want to do draft, Pioneer is a good option. I think when you start looking at like the ultra eternal formats like Vintage and Legacy and all of those, your cost is just immense. Getting your land base can potentially cost you thousands and thousands of pounds. Magic isn't cheap. I'm not sure the point of cost is going to go either way, because Magic at its heart is a very expensive game.
Yeah.
Commander can't be the cheapest format. Those Pioneer Challenger decks,
They were pretty decent, yeah.
yeah, and they were pretty affordable, but like Wizards is too busy printing off Commander decks that they just don't put any more focus on it. But the last round of them were all pretty good, bar like one of the decks which was a bit sort of incoherent. Like the other decks were like really good, and at the time like there were 3 more or less meta decks. I mean, Pioneer's not super expensive. Even like building a competitive deck, you can keep it pretty cheap. I have built 2 budget Pioneer decks that I had so much fun with, and I still have so much fun with. Like they're still reasonably competitive. I haven't done like huge amounts of upgrading on those.
That's one argument, but I think you can still build budget Commander decks. There's a huge pool of cards out there. No, don't get me wrong, yeah, 90% of them probably trash. But 10% of that huge pool of cards are really good. Goblin decks, for example, they're not expensive to build. And you talk about land base, it's a monocolored deck. Just have basic lands and you're done. It's just as good. Enchantress deck, another brilliant, cheap, just full of enchantments, and it's very cheap to build around, especially with the right commanders. And I think even like clever burn decks with the right commander. Recently we had Imodane came out. Remember Imodane from the recent set? All of a sudden people are popping off with all these crazy burn decks coming out all of a sudden, and they're really cheap to build. Even if you're going to build your own deck in Commander, I think you can still do it pretty cheap.
I mean, it's even like you look at Dragon Shields. There's always like 100 Dragon Shields in it. It's like
For Commander, hello.
No, I just want 60 of them. I don't need 100. What am I going to do with the other 40 card sleeves that I have left in there?
Use them for draft.
Use them for draft.
Yeah.
I suppose that's an opportunity for me to segue into our store Gathering Games. If you do want to buy Dragon Shields or anything trading card game related, including MTG, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Flesh and Blood, and lots more, why not check us out in the link in the description below. And like and subscribe. Anyway,
let's talk about creativity of deck building. Now, come on, Commander. 25,000 cards out there. We've got access to near enough all of them. What more creativity can you get?
I agree with you there. Like, I do think like a Commander. I think there's a whole point in Commander, right? When it was still sort of very much sort of community driven. The benefit they found from it was that it was, it provided a lot of creativity.
I mean, you're always banging on about how deck expression is king. Well,
yeah,
express yourself here.
I just don't enjoy the singleton formats. This is one of the issues that I have with Magic, and again, it kind of ties into points I made earlier. You genuinely get like a quite a random experience in Magic. Is that fair to say that the Magic, the experience of Commander can be like really random? It's not predictable what card's going to come next.
We come out of kind of board games where sometimes it's very much defined strategies and all of these types of things, and Magic generally has a lot more variance.
Yeah, so it's an unbalanced experience then, isn't it?
No, it's just a little bit more random.
It's unbalanced then, isn't it?
You can balance things, but
we try to balance things with Rule Zero, but like you can't really do that. Like
tutor cards will balance things out quite well.
I'm not necessarily against the idea of like randomness within Commander. I think that was kind of the point in it, right?
Yeah.
I think the issues that I have is that when people then try to put tutors in it to try and streamline their deck, and then going against the whole ethos of how you're meant to play Commander is to treat it as this casual format where it's kind of just like throwing jank spells at each other and just seeing it pop off every now and then and just seeing the most stupid combos and just having a laugh with it. I mean, I personally, I don't like that random experience. I can appreciate that some people like it. I want to feel like I improve in my experience playing that game. And when it's so random, you can never get that feeling of, oh, right, okay, I just had a great play there. I played this deck so well today. You didn't play that deck so well. It's just because the next card that you needed came out, is a 1 in 100 chance. Or 1 in 99 or something, right? Assuming you haven't drawn a card at that point.
The beauty of Commander is that with so many options open to you, same with any TCG, it's synergies, and finding the variance of synergies out there it's not 1 in 99 cards. I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. You will have maybe 15 cards in that deck that can all achieve the same thing. Or maybe 20 cards. You might have that 1 in 5 chance, more like one rather than 1 in 99. You can make it highly synergistic.
But you can do that with city card constructed, where you can have 4 copies of a card. So if you're just trying to get multiple cards which do the same thing, then it just sounds like you should be playing a 1v1 constructed format then.
Nice to have different art on the cards as well.
That's a terrible argument.
But all right, look, I think for me the idea of the singleton format, what it does really well for me,
What does it do really well?
is variability in your game. No 2 games of Commander should be alike, and no 2 games of Commander are ever alike. Because you've got that many cards, 100 cards, and then all singleton, there's so many different things that can happen with that same deck of cards. I've played my Boros Artifacts deck, and I promise you, I've had multiple games with that deck, and none of the games have been alike.
I think that's just too much variability, though. Like, I think it's really unfair. I think the point you're going to make now is that, 60 card constructed feels exactly the same each time.
Same every time.
It does not feel the same every time, right?
Running through the same motions.
You don't run through the same motions. There's some predictable...
A, B, C, D, E.
No, there's some predictable combinations that happen within those games, or predictable patterns that happen. But there's just enough variability in it that there is decision making within it, and you can feel the consequences, whether positive or negative, of that decision making. The decision making in Commander is like, here's my card, I'm going to play this because I just top decked it.
Do you want to tell the audience the last 2 decks you've built in Pioneer? Have they both been combo decks?
They have both been
And
combo decks.
what is the idea of a combo deck?
Is to pull combo. But that's just, that is a very naive perspective on this, right? That's assuming that your combo is linear, as in there's only one route to victory in that combo. Whereas there's multiple chains, it sort of branches out like this, and then it might come together to have an ultimate goal. But like, which chain do you go? Do you go down? Do you go left? Do you go center? Do you go down the middle, or do you go down to the right? This is not true to say that 60 card constructed is a linear format. It is so far from linear. But what it allows you to do is to become a master of that deck. Okay, I'll agree. That Abzan deck that I was playing, it's pretty linear. Okay, fine, I'll admit that. I don't think Lotus Field Combo, which is the other combo deck that I play in Pioneer, I don't think that's a linear deck. In fact, it has multiple win cons in it. So like the actual end of the chain, there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different win cons that you can go and you can pursue. I think that's an amazing example of like a combo deck, if you want to talk about combo decks that are entirely non-linear, and it really challenges you. They are skillful decks. And I never felt once, whenever I play Commander, that anybody's ever played skillfully. And let's not include CDH here again. I'm going to make that point because I do not know anything about CDH. I'm never talking about that.
We can agree to disagree on this.
Well, I think we're going to have to. Another one of the big issues that I personally have with Commander is just how long the games last. I feel envious when I'm looking at the other table and they've sort of finished their game in half an hour, and I'm like, I'm still here, and I'm on turn 2, and we've got nowhere, and I've only got 1 basic land out, and nothing to help me ramp. I'm worrying to myself, thinking that this is going to take like 3 or 4 hours, and I'm just going to get bored of this game. And that's always what happens, right? It's always what happens, and just get so bored of the game, and then you have to sit and somebody's taking a half an hour to do their turn.
Look, it's meant to be a board game format for Magic.
What do you mean by that?
I pull out a board game, I know the rest of my evening is gone dedicated towards this one board game. At least that's the kind of board games I like to play. And that's what Commander does so well. I know the rest of my evening is going to be spent playing maybe 1 or 2 games of Commander. They might go fast, we might squeeze in a 3rd game, but that's what it's about for me. It's about that type of experience. You get a Commander game in about an hour.
Honestly, like every game I've played of Commander recently has lasted like 3 hours, and it's just been way too long. I genuinely find it unfun. I'd much rather sit down and have multiple games or play throughout a tournament in that time. I just genuinely can't keep focused on Commander.
Yeah, but that's what makes you so invested. When the game is that long, you become really invested in what you're doing.
I don't feel invested at all. I just feel so bored. That it's the total opposite. Like, I don't know how anybody gets so invested in those games.
Nah.
And then if you're getting that invested in it, it just goes to show that you're taking it way too seriously and probably should be playing a different format, which is probably competitive.
You almost become like one with your commander. Have you never become one with your commander before?
No, I've never felt that way. Throughout Magic history, the one phrase that has always stood true is life is a resource. They've never changed it so that you can, place 2 lands per turn ever. That's always been consistent.
Yeah.
So how can they get away with adding, 20 life points to this? I think that just changes the flow of Magic. It particularly in this, like, you should have less health. right?
Why would you have less health?
Because the games are way too long. You
If
should
you've
have less
got
health.
3 people before you could be dead before your first turn.
Yeah, you know what? That would probably make me happy when I'm commander. I don't have to play those games for so long.
Look, the point of 40 life is spending more time doing the more interesting types of strategies that you actually like in Magic. So I can't understand it. You don't like aggro decks.
Not particularly.
Yeah, well, they're not very viable in Commander. So happy days there. You love blue. You always play blue. Blue and something else, always. And those are the type of decks that really work well in Commander.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, right? But like, I don't personally like playing aggro decks. But aggro has its space in like constructed formats. Like there's that whole sort of spectrum of where your deck sits. Is it aggro mid range or is it control? Magic was always created around that balance of those types of decks. You know, that has those terms have like inherited to other trading card games which sort of use that formula. Where Magic is, you know, a land-based system or resource-based system, those deck archetypes, or in a really broad sense, those deck archetypes still stand true. I think it's probably a bad thing, the aggro decks. I wish somebody would just play an aggro deck and finish the game sooner, and not make it last 4 hours.
No, I don't know. I think it's a positive that we have a space where more interesting, more intricate styles of gameplay can take place. You play standard and sometimes you just run out of steam because of the aggro decks you end up playing against. And it just, once again, I think that makes it linear. How many times have you been in a draft and aggro wins?
Yeah, that depends on the draft format, you know? Right? It does very much depend on the draft format. I think as of recently, if you're looking at like standard set releases, which is the drafts that I tend to do, there probably has been a favor for aggro. Yeah, I get that. There are more balanced experiences as draft environments where it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, just being an aggro deck is going to win. And other strategies and archetypes have more viability. My experience with Commander is the person who can stay bored the longest is probably going to be the person who wins, because I usually scoop because I get bored.
It's Commander that has made MTG relevant again today.
How so?
Commander is more played now than ever before. Standard is dying or dead. It's also easier now to jump onto Magic because of Commander and the open socialness of Commander. Is socialness a word? Unlike the whole competitive nature of, you know, of what Magic used to be like, scaring away new players. I think it's a great place to be at the moment. Is Magic the most supported for good reason, because it's the most played.
But I think it's because Wizards butchered their competitive audience. I don't think it's because Commander took over. I think they literally actively went and butchered their competitive audiences. Like they destroyed and changed the format of all of the competitive Magic scene. They hardly support it anymore like they used to do in the tournament scene. They just let Commander take over for whatever reason. Commander has literally just become the face of Magic. There was that core audience there that wanted that tight experience and competitive experience that I always want from Magic. They have since shifted to like other games, and Wizards has not done a good job in maintaining that audience. Like I genuinely like have times where I feel like I'm falling out of love with Magic because it's so Commander focused. Like there's gonna be those people that really think that Commander is everything for Magic. In fact, you know what? Most people I even talk to, if they've picked up Magic in the last sort of like 5 years, or it's more than 5 years, like post 2010, all they really know of Magic is either the pre-release events, which they'll go to because the new sets come out, or Commander, and that isn't what Magic is. I mean, pre-release is fun, right? But like at its core, Magic is supposed to be a competitive game played at 60 card in a constructed format, or in the format of draft. Those are the formats that get played in a competitive space.
You're back to competitive again. You know, that's not what Commander is. I think Commander should exist or coexist in line with the competitive formats.
I don't think Wizards thinks that though. I think they should think they believe that Commander should be the only format that exists. They want to milk it, and they want to monetize Commander as much as they possibly can, and make you pay ridiculous money for sets like Commander Masters that they think that people will be willing to spend £22 for a booster, for a set booster. It's not even a collected booster, right?
My point initially...
Are you trying to argue that Wizards are not milking the hell out of Commander players?
I mean, yeah, Wizards is milking everyone at the moment, but, you know, let's stick to the point. My point is relevance of Magic. If there was no Commander, Magic could be dead.
it's Wizards' fault that they lost relevancy, and the only thing that they can keep relevant is Commander, because it's basically it's the only TCG that has a proper and a reasonably good like social format, and it's their own fault for doing it. Like people are just going to blame Flesh and Blood now, aren't they? Like everyone who is into competitive Magic is just like, you know what, I'll just play Flesh and Blood, who are they're objectively doing the best competitive organized play of all trading card games, with like 1.5 million on every sort of on an annual basis for the World Championship. What happened to the heyday of Magic? It's gone, and they did it. They chose to. Well, for whatever reason, they chose to. I mean, you talk about it being like this board game experience, right? One of the great things about board games and like the whole sort of modern renaissance of board games is that they've really sort of stepped away from the idea of player elimination, and I think player elimination isn't fun. I don't think it really should have a place in modern board games. And we've discussed this. Do you agree? Yes, you do. You do agree. Well, go on. What?
I mean, yeah.
Basically, yes, you agree. Okay. So, why is player elimination so acceptable in Commander? It's boring. It's genuinely boring for the player that gets eliminated. And you try and match them up with another player or another pod or something, and it just causes hassle.
Nah, I mean, it's depends once again on the player groups, but my group, except me, everyone else is really nice. So if we see somebody low on health, we kind of leave them alone and then target the person with the most health. Yeah, no, you don't play that kind of game. I don't do that either. If I see someone weak, I want to kill them. The title of the video is about why Commander sucks. It doesn't. But what is the best format then for you?
The big issue I've had, and I've kept stating over this video, is that it's a social format that's treated too much like it's supposed to be competitive. So I say to those players, why not play a proper competitive experience? If you like a social experience, if you like competition, and why you could have both. You could have both, right? Imagine that there's a format of Magic that you can have both of those things, where you can have creative deck building. We can have this experience with more than 2 players. Then play Limited, play Draft. Draft should be a more popular format than it is, because it gives you all of those things. You build a deck there on the fly. It tests your skill. It tests your ability to build a deck. It tests your ability to compete against others. And it does it in a really social way, where you get to play games with multiple people, where you get to sit around each other in a draft pod and crack packs together. That's what the gathering is. That is what separates. It's not Commander for me that separates Magic from every other trading card game. I think it's Limited. I genuinely think Limited is what separates Magic from everything else. I'm trying to look at like all the other trading card games. There's been only a handful of times where Yu-Gi-Oh sort of successfully pulled off Limited, and pre-release is always considered in Yu-Gi-Oh to be something that's so casual. Like you can never really make any sort of decent decks, and you just kind of put some cards together and see what happens. Whereas Magic, you sit down at pre-release and like you can actually make genuinely like pretty good decks. Like I've seen it at Pokemon as well. It's always considered like really pretty much random. In fact, you don't even need to do any deck building. You take one of those build and battle stadiums and you've got a built deck, and most people just tend to play with those. I'm trying to look at any other trading card games. So the Bandai ones, I don't know if any of them really do drafting. If they do, it's not a very popular way to play the game. Like those games are still meant to be played as 60 card as a constructed format, as opposed to a limited format. Flesh and Blood is probably the only one that really stands out, that really allows for draft. I love Flesh and Blood. I think Flesh and Blood is my favorite trading card game at the moment. But this video is not about Flesh and Blood. What I think actually Magic has above everything, and including Flesh and Blood, is how well it can do Limited. I'm very critical of Wizards of the Coast, but I do not feel like I should be critical of Wizards of the Coast for their designers in terms of draft and sealed, because they are the best in the business. It sits in the shadow of something like Commander, where everyone's talking about all of these horrible experiences. Like, we were sort of instigated by doing this title because we see it so much online about people talking about Rule Zero and talking about how challenging Commander can be. In some ways, this sort of debate was just kind of like a reflection of my experiences of that and my thoughts of why aren't more people trying Limited, because it sounds like it ticks the box for all of the things that they really want from it. I suppose that's kind of like my moral of the story.
So your answer to your favorite format of Magic is your favorite format of Magic is Flesh and Blood. Is that right?
Yes. That's correct.
I love Commander. Is it my favorite format of Magic? Nah, draft's my favorite format.
There you go. So that's it. You know,
But-
you just admitted that draft is your favorite.
But they exist in their own space. I play draft because I want that deck building experience. I want the experience of not having to worry how deep is your pocket, how deep is anyone else's pocket around me. It's an even playing field. Say what you want about it, it is an even playing field. And if you're complaining that you don't like draft because of X, Y, and Z, no, you just don't know how to build a deck properly. And you're probably net decking those Commander decks. Commander exists for its own thing. It's its own space. They coexist side by side. And when I want to do something more sociable, I play Commander. If I want a bit of competition or just to do a bit of deck building on the fly, trying to find synergies, and draft is my favorite as well. They are both my favorites. Can I have two favorites?